It was the second week of October, 2019, when a woman named Julie Stafford walked out of the woods behind a farmhouse in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and stopped at the gravel drive to check herself over. She was not inexperienced. Julie had grown up in that stretch of the Susquehanna uplands, had hiked the ridge trails for 30 years, and could tell a wood tick from a deer tick in her palm. She had pulled hundreds of them off her clothing, off her dogs, off her forearms after summer walks through the high grass along the creek bottoms. Tick checks were reflexive for her. Unhurried, the kind of thing she did the way she locked a car door. She found a tick she did not recognize. Not unfamiliar the way a tick you have simply never noticed before is unfamiliar. Unfamiliar the way a foreign coin feels in your pocket when you were not expecting anything there. This one was smaller than a sesame seed, brownish red, oval-shaped, with no markings on its back. No white spot. No banded legs, no visible feature to anchor it to any species she had encountered in 3 decades of walking these fields. She removed it carefully with tweezers, sealed it in a small plastic bag, and drove it to her county extension office on Monday morning. The entomologist who looked at it held it to the light and paused longer than she expected. The tick was Haemaphysalis longicornis, the Asian longhorn tick, a species native to East Asia, common in Japan, China, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. A species that 2 years earlier had been considered a distant biological curiosity with no established presence in the contiguous United States. A species that had never been recorded in Pennsylvania. Julie's first instinct was that she had stumbled onto something unusual, a one-in-a-million encounter with something foreign and strange, the kind of story you tell at Thanksgiving. That instinct was wrong. Because here is what was already true in October of 2019. Whether or not anyone walking the ridge trails near Susquehanna's western branch knew it, the Asian longhorn tick was no longer a stranger in those fields. It was established. It was breeding. It had been waiting in the goldenrod stands and the brushy fence rows and the tall grass along the drainage ditches that thread through the farmland of Lancaster County, almost certainly for more than a season. And it was not the only tick that had arrived somewhere it had never been before. In August of 2017, a sheep farmer in Hunterdon County, New Jersey, noticed something wrong on his animals. The flock was covered in ticks unlike anything he recognized, clusters of them along the ears and faces and legs of his Southdown sheep in the green pasture behind his barn. A state veterinarian was called. Specimens were collected and sent to a laboratory. The identification came back, Haemaphysalis longicornis. The same species, established in a New Jersey pasture. Wildlife officials responded quickly. They searched the immediate area, treated the flock, notified federal agencies. The working assumption at the time was that the tick had arrived recently on imported livestock or migratory birds, that the population was small and localized, and that rapid response could contain it. A reasonable assumption. An incorrect one. By 2018, the Asian longhorn tick had been confirmed in 7 states along the eastern seaboard. By 2019, that number had climbed to 12. By 2021, the tick had been detected in at least 19 states, stretching from Maine to Georgia, west into Arkansas and Missouri, with new county records appearing each season. One sighting is an anomaly. 7 states is a pattern. 19 states is something operating at a different scale entirely. But the Asian longhorn tick is only one piece of a much larger picture. And in some ways, it is not even the most alarming part of what is happening to the tick population of North America right now. The black-legged tick, Ixodes scapularis, the primary carrier of Lyme disease in the eastern United States, has extended its established range northward by roughly 46 kilometers per year, according to a study published in the journal Environmental Health Perspectives in 2016. In the 1970s, this species range was largely confined to the coastal Northeast and a small pocket of the upper Midwest. Today it is established in every state east of the Rocky Mountains, and it has moved into southern Canada in numbers that were not projected to arrive until the middle of this century. The Lone Star Tick. Amblyomma americanum, identifiable by a single white dot in the center of the female's back, was considered a species of the Deep South as recently as the 1990s. Its stronghold was the brushy pine forests of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and the Gulf states. Today it is common on Long Island, documented breeding in coastal Maine, and established in the rural Midwest as far north as Iowa. No predator in North American recorded history has expanded its range this fast, this broadly, across this many climatic zones simultaneously. Not the coyote moving east in the 20th century. Not the brown-headed cowbird following agricultural expansion across the plains. Not the white-tailed deer reclaiming the forests of New England after 2 centuries of logging. The tick is winning a geographic conquest that no major wildlife projection model fully anticipated, and that most people driving past the tall grass at the edge of their local hiking trails have not yet stopped to consider. There are roughly 900 known tick species worldwide. About 90 are established in the United States. Of those, a small number carry the greatest biological consequence, and understanding what each one carries requires spending a moment with each. The black-legged tick is a creature of extraordinary patience. An adult female clings to the tip of a grass stem or the underside of a hawthorn leaf, front legs extended, holding perfectly still. Scientists call this posture questing. The tick does not hunt. It does not pursue. It simply holds itself at the edge of a likely path and waits, sensing the carbon dioxide and body warmth of any warm-blooded animal that passes close enough to reach. In its larval stage, the black-legged tick is approximately the size of a poppy seed. At the nymph stage, it grows to roughly the size of a freckle on a pale forearm. This is the stage at which it most commonly transmits Lyme disease to humans, because this is the stage that most people fail to notice on a tick check. Borrelia burgdorferi, the corkscrew-shaped bacterium that causes Lyme disease, was first identified in 1982 by Swiss-American scientist Willy Burgdorfer, working from tick specimens collected on Shelter Island, New York. The disease had been circling through the Northeast for at least a decade before that. In 1975, a cluster of children in the small town of Old Lyme, Connecticut, were developing juvenile arthritis at rates that made no sense. A woman named Polly Murray documented the cases from house to house, driving the back roads of the Connecticut shoreline, compiling records by hand. It took 7 years of investigation before Burgdorfer's identification of the pathogen gave those cases a name. Today, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that approximately 476,000 Americans are diagnosed with Lyme disease each year. That figure is almost certainly an undercount of true infections. The Lone Star tick occupies a different threat profile. It does not transmit Lyme disease, but it carries ehrlichiosis, a bacterial illness capable of causing high fever, severe headache, and organ damage that can be fatal if untreated. It carries heartland virus, first identified in a Missouri farmer in 2009, still incompletely characterized. And it carries the capacity to cause something that took medicine years to recognize and name. People bitten by the Lone Star tick sometimes develop an immune response to a sugar molecule called alpha-gal, found in the tissues of most non-primate mammals. After that sensitization, eating beef, pork, or lamb can trigger hives, cramping, vomiting, and anaphylaxis. The allergic reaction typically appears 3 to 6 hours after the meal, not immediately, which for years made it nearly invisible to physicians who were looking for an immediate cause. Between 2010 and 2022, approximately 110,000 suspected cases of alpha-gal syndrome were identified in the United States through antibody testing, according to a report published by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in July 2023. The agency estimated that as many as 450,000 additional Americans may carry this sensitivity without a diagnosis. The Asian longhorn tick presents a third kind of problem entirely. In the countries where it has been established the longest, Japan, China, and South Korea, it transmits severe fever with thrombocytopenia syndrome, a disease that has killed thousands of people. As of this writing, that particular pathogen has not been detected in American populations of the tick. But this tick has been present in the United States for fewer than 10 years, and it possesses one biological trait that sets it completely apart from every other tick species currently established in North America. It reproduces without males. A single female Asian longhorn tick, with no mating required, can lay a clutch of more than 2,000 eggs. Scientists call this parthenogenesis. One tick becomes 2,000. 2,000 become 4 million, a population explosion that requires no second animal, no encounter between hosts, no pair bond in the grass. A single individual dropped from a passing deer into a field of tall grass is, in biological terms, already a colony waiting to emerge. If this is the kind of natural history that makes you look twice at country you thought you knew, subscribe to this channel. We cover the cases that science has not closed yet. The species that do not wait for permission from the range maps. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. Tell me whether you have started checking yourself more carefully after time outdoors. That geography matters more than you might think. The spread of tick populations across North America is not the product of one cause. It is the convergence of several forces, most of which have been accelerating simultaneously since roughly the 1980s. White-tailed deer are the most visible factor. Adult ticks of most species feed almost exclusively on large mammals, and a single white-tailed deer can carry hundreds of adult ticks at a time. As white-tailed deer populations have expanded across the eastern United States, following the collapse of natural predators and the growth of suburban edge habitat, the dense brushy growth that forms where woodland meets lawn and meadow meets subdivision, ticks have followed. A mature doe walking a fence line overgrown with pokeweed and multiflora rose at the edge of a New Jersey subdivision carries her passengers out of established tick territory and into new terrain with every step. Birds carry ticks as well. Migratory songbirds, wood thrushes, Swainson's thrushes, ovenbirds, moving north along the Atlantic flyway each spring, carry larval and nymphal ticks from southern populations into regions where those ticks have no established record. A study published in the journal Parasites and Vectors in 2014 tracked migratory birds arriving in southern Quebec during spring migration and found that more than 37 species were carrying tick species from populations farther south. More than a quarter of the ticks recovered from those birds tested positive for Borrelia burgdorferi. Climate is the third lever. Ticks are cold-blooded. Their survival, their activity cycles, and the timing of their life stages are all tied directly to temperature. A warmer winter means more tick larvae survive into the nymph stage the following spring. A longer autumn means more adult ticks feeding and mating before the first killing frost. A 2002 study published in Global Change Biology modeled the future habitat range of the black-legged tick under moderate warming scenarios and projected a northward expansion of several hundred kilometers by mid-century. Those projections have already been exceeded. These are not theoretical forces. They are documented, measurable, and ongoing. The tick range expansion is not a forecast. It is a record of what has already happened. Honesty requires saying plainly what the skeptics get right. Tick-borne diseases are not new. People have always gotten sick from tick bites. Some researchers argue that the apparent increase in disease cases reflects better surveillance, more sensitive diagnostic tests, and greater physician awareness rather than a genuine biological change in tick populations or geographic range. That argument deserves a real answer. The answer comes in 3 parts, and not one of them requires the tick to be absent from places it has never been before. The first part is coverage. Tick surveillance in the United States is conducted largely at the county level, by state health departments operating with limited budgets, often relying on passive reporting from physicians and veterinary clinics rather than active field monitoring. A tick species establishing itself in a rural county with no formal surveillance infrastructure may go undetected for years. The confirmed range maps represent documented detections, not comprehensive surveys. The blank spaces on those maps are not empty. They are unsurveyed. The second part is classification. A physician in rural Ohio seeing a patient with joint swelling, fatigue, and intermittent fever may not order a Lyme panel if the patient lives in a county not historically associated with tick-borne disease. The diagnostic logic is circular. The disease is presumed rare in a region, so physicians there do not test for it, so cases go undetected, so the disease continues to appear rare. The map of diagnosed Lyme disease cases in the United States is not the map of Lyme disease. It is the map of physician expectation about where Lyme disease should be. The third part is history. In 1975, no physician in Old Lyme, Connecticut understood what the illness affecting those children was, because it had not yet been described. Alpha-gal syndrome was first characterized in the medical literature in 2009. Heartland virus was identified the same year. The Powassan virus, which we will return to in a moment, was first identified in a human patient in 1958 in Powassan, Ontario, and then largely ignored for the following 5 decades. New disease is not always a new pathogen. Sometimes it is an old pathogen finally meeting the conditions it needs to spread. Not enough to confirm. Not enough to dismiss. The history of range expansion in North American wildlife is a history of missed early signals, followed by belated acknowledgement, and the tick fits that pattern precisely. The coyote is the clearest parallel. A species native to the Great Plains and the American Southwest, it began moving east through the first decades of the 20th century as wolves were eliminated from the eastern forests. Wildlife managers at the time classified the accounts coming from New England and the mid-Atlantic as errors, misidentified dogs, escaped animals from captivity. By the 1980s, coyotes were raising pups in the suburbs of New York City. By 2012, they were documented inside Central Park in Manhattan. The field guides that had drawn their range boundary at the Mississippi River were simply wrong, and the coyote had not waited to be invited past it. The fisher, a dark-furred member of the weasel family roughly the size of a large house cat, was functionally absent from most of New England by the mid-20th century. Trapped to commercial extinction for its pelt, reintroduced in small numbers in the northeastern states between 1956 and 1969, it expanded its range far beyond what any recovery model predicted. Within 2 decades, fishers were documented taking prey on the outskirts of Worcester, Massachusetts, then closer to Boston. The maps again fell behind the animal. The Asian longhorn tick follows the same template precisely. A single detection in New Jersey in 2017. A rapid and competent response. And the tick was already in Virginia. Already in West Virginia. Already in Pennsylvania, in the same county where Julie Stafford would find one on her neck 2 years later. The gap between first detection and established presence is not the window during which a species arrives. It is the window during which a species becomes too widespread to miss anymore. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. That phrase carries particular weight when applied to tick surveillance in the United States, because the monitoring system that would catch a spreading tick species in its earliest stages of establishment does not exist at the scale needed to catch it early. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention supports tick surveillance through state health departments, but the coverage is uneven. Some counties across the Appalachians and the upper Midwest have not had a formal tick drag survey, the method of pulling a square meter of white flannel cloth through low vegetation to collect and count ticks, since the early 2000s. Others have never had one. A tick species establishing itself in such a county between survey cycles may go unnoticed for years. Academic research fills some gaps. Studies from the Yale School of Public Health, from Johns Hopkins, from the University of Rhode Island, have mapped tick populations at fine spatial resolution in portions of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. But a research study covers a defined geography for a defined period. It is not continuous monitoring. Between studies, the tick does not hold still. And then there is the question of what happens to the ticks that people actually find on their bodies. Most people remove a tick, drop it in the toilet, and move on. A smaller number save the tick and submit it to university identification programs. The Tick Report program at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, which processes submitted ticks from across the country and has been running since 2012, has detected tick species in counties where no prior records existed. But the program is limited by self-selection. It catches what people choose to send in. The ticks that go unfound do not report themselves. Now return to the Parasites virus. The Parasites virus is carried by the black-legged tick and by a related species called the woodchuck tick. It can cause encephalitis, a swelling of the brain, combined with fever, confusion, neurological damage, and death. Approximately 12% of people who develop severe neurological Parasites symptoms die from the illness. Of those who survive, roughly half experience long-term effects, including memory impairment, recurring headaches, and muscle weakness that persists for years. Between 2011 and 2021, 199 cases of Parasites virus disease were reported to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States. But here is the piece of information that reframes everything else. Lyme disease typically requires a tick to be attached for 36 to 48 hours before Borrelia burgdorferi transmission is likely. The standard advice to shower and check for ticks within 24 hours of outdoor activity is sound guidance for reducing Lyme disease risk. Parasites virus can be transmitted in as little as 15 minutes of tick attachment. There is no vaccine for Parasites virus. There is no antiviral treatment. Most infections are mild enough that the person never seeks medical care and never learns what made them briefly sick. But the infections that are not mild in ways that leave room for error, and the tick that transmits it has been expanding its range northward by roughly 46 kilometers each year for the past several decades. Come back to the bathroom in the Lancaster County farmhouse. Julie Stafford, standing at the mirror, the small plastic bag on the edge of the sink, the tick sealed inside. She had done everything her county extension pamphlet recommended. She had worn long sleeves and tucked her cuffs into her gloves. She had sprayed her jacket with repellent before she left the house. She had checked herself when she came out of the brush, running her fingers along her collar, through her hair, down her arms. And the tick had found the half-inch strip of skin between her collar and her hairline, the one spot she had not reached. When the entomologist called with the identification, she asked him what she should be doing differently. He was quiet for a moment. He told her the honest answer. The tick was established in her county now. There was no practical intervention that would reduce her exposure to zero. What she could do was what she had always done. Check carefully after any outdoor time. Treat her clothing with permethrin before hiking, shower within a few hours of coming inside, and know what a bullseye rash on her own skin looks like. Know what flu-like symptoms following tick exposure ought to mean to her. The tools had not changed. The landscape had changed. The tick on the back of her neck had not arrived from somewhere distant and exotic. It had arrived from the brushy field on the other side of the stone wall at the edge of the property, where it had almost certainly been present, and breeding and questing from its grass stems for at least 2 full seasons before anyone in Lancaster County noticed. This is the space the entire question lives in. Not confirmed long ago. Not dismissed as absent, simply present, in the tall vegetation along the fence rows and the leaf litter under the oak canopy, undetected until the moment someone looked closely enough. Tick populations in the United States are not merely spreading outward from some historical center. They are filling in, occupying the counties and the elevation bands and the suburban woodlot edges, where the field guides and the range maps drew lines, where the old wisdom said that winters were cold enough to prevent them. Winters that are no longer what they were. The white-tailed deer move through the brushy corridors that connect the woodlands at the back of one subdivision to the woodlands at the back of the next, carrying their passengers into backyards and garden edges and the mowed lawn where children play. The wood thrushes fly north from their wintering grounds in the Central American forest each spring, their feathers carrying what they collected from the southern brush. A species capable of producing 2,000 offspring from a single individual that will feed on any warm-blooded animal within reach that carries a suite of pathogens still being cataloged in its American populations, does not require a clear migration corridor or a mild winter or a specific host to succeed. It requires a grass stem. And time. Julie still walks the Susquehanna Ridge trails. She checks herself more carefully now. She told the entomologist that she had started thinking about it during walks, noticing the goldenrod stems at shoulder height along the rail trail, the way the seed heads caught the light in late September, the way the tall grass at the field's edge pressed in toward the path. The hills look the same. She moves through them differently. The question is not whether ticks are spreading across North America. That question has been answered by county record after county record, by species confirmation after species confirmation, by a range map that looks different every few years than it did before. The question is how long they have already been present in the places where no one has surveyed, and what they have been carrying, and passing along to the animals and people who walked through the grass and felt nothing. That question